Hello everyone, my name is Falua and today my presentation is about mass incarceration of Black people in the United States. Introduction. So, despite having less than 5% of the world's population, the US has more than 20% of the world's prison population. In other words, the US has the highest number of people behind bars in the world. Among the most known effects of mass incarceration is how it hurts people of color. For instance, the current incarceration rate of blacks in America is 5 times more than whites, despite blacks not even making up a fifth of the general population. This presentation focuses on the mass incarceration of Black people in the United States, and more specifically, the reasons behind bar and the possible solution to this problem. So this presentation will cover the literature review, theory, methodology section, and ethics section. Key terms. So by definition, the term of mass incarceration can be defined as the confinement or imprisonment of large number of people in a country or region. Other people also define mass incarceration as the concentration of incarceration among minorities or marginalized in society. The terms Black and African American are often used interchangeably. However, the two terms mean two different but related things. Key issue and debate. Some of the biggest questions raised here are: what are the causes to mass incarceration of Black in the US, and what are the possible solutions to this issue? Reasons behind mass incarceration of Black. So there are three causes of mass incarceration. One is the historically racialized criminal justice system in the United States, and the historical aspect of the mass incarceration of Black can be traced back into the 1960s during the civil rights activism. It is thought that the Black activism of the 1960s created anxiety among the white elites, who saw it important to silence them by sending some of them behind bars. Another instance where history has a role is during the war on drugs during the 1970s and 80s. While the war on drugs was intended to help rid of the country of drugs and problems causing it, it didn't take long before the war on drugs take a racial path. In less than 20 years since the since the introduction of war of drugs, the number of Black arrested for drug-related offenses has increased so fast. And the second is the discriminatory application in the country. So mass incarceration of Black in the US is highly linked to a strong relationship between mass incarceration and racism. Discrimination is widespread in the system of the United States. The American criminal justice system has also been characterized for targeting minorities. For instance, in 2020, Black and African Americans represented just 12.4% of the US population, despite having the highest incarceration rate per 100,000 residents at 465. Also, Blacks are known to serve longer sentences as compared to the white, even when even when the crimes in questions are similar. The third thing is recidivism. The third thing is high recidivism rates among Black. So another possible explanation for mass incarceration of Black is the high recidivism rates among Blacks. For instance, it's about 72.7% of Black offenders released from prison are likely to be rearrested at opposite to 59.1 among the white. So the possible solution to this problem. So first, identification of crime that are responsible for putting Black behind bars, such as high poverty rate, gun access, and drug usage to minimize the chances of Black engaging in such crimes. Second is programs should be created to prevent reincarceration. These programs aim to providing transitional service and daily support required for the ex-prisoners. In addition, the program aims to provide necessary treatment for individuals suffering from substance use disorders, life skills, knowledge, employment opportunities, and housing. Theory. The theories that explain the mass incarceration of Black in the United States are the deterrence theory, and the incarceration theory. The Turnus theory was developed from the workers of Cassara Bonsana and D. Beccaria, and Thomas Hobbes and Jeremy Bentham. It is often used to explain the relationship between punishment and crime. The theory is that rational individual will always wait and gain losses of crime and will always be discouraged from committing the crime if the losses outweigh the potential gains. As a result, people are expected to avoid crime if they are likely to get punished for it. So the theory has two important aspects to it: the severity of punishment and the certainty of punishment. The severity of punishment focuses on the amount of potential loss after committing the crime. For instance, the length of a sentence or the fine is likely to get after committing a crime. More severe punishment should discourage people more. The certainty of punishment aspect focuses on the probability of getting punished, like the detection rates or arrest rates of a crime. People are therefore more likely to avoid crimes where the risk of getting arrested or punishment is very high. In terms of applicability to the issue of mass incarceration of Black is the U.S. and is the deterrence theory shows how government attempts to discourage crime through imprisonment might have resulted in mass incarceration. For instance, the war on drugs of the 1970s and 80s increased the numbers of Black rearrested for drug-related offenses. This applies to the longer sentence for those found selling drugs near school. Theory of incarceration. Incarceration ensured that the individual does not commit a crime by either removing them from society permanently or temporarily or physically, restricting their ability to commit a crime. Though that getting rid of such kind of people in society will result in a decrease in the number of crimes in society. Incarceration can be divided into restrictive or disabling measures. Example of restrictive measures are disqualification and probation, while example of the disabling measures are incarceration and death sentence for capital offenses. In terms of its applicability, the issue of mass incarceration of Black in the U.S. In the U.S. So this theory also explains how the war on drugs contributed to the mass incarceration of Blacks. For instance, the restrict drug offenders from committing crimes again, the government often sends them to prison. However, this has been devastating to the Black communities because most of the drug-related offenders going to prison are Black. Methodologies. Some of the commonly used methodologies in this issue include meta-analysis, systematic review, and retrospective record reviews, and surveys and depth reviews. Here we'll focus on use of surveys and retrospective records reviews. A survey refers to a study approach where subjective opinions are collected from participants. Surveys can be exploratory, descriptive, or explanatory surveys. With exploratory surveys, the research focuses on investigating and understanding a certain topic without expecting specific responses or answers. And the descriptive surveys focus on describing people's perception and views as far as a certain issue is concerned. Explanatory surveys aim to explain or predict relationships between respondent and characters and the issue under study. The strength. The good thing about the survey is that they can be done remotely, as it is the case with online surveys. This could cut the cost spent by the researcher. So for the weaknesses, surveys can be costly sometimes in case when they are done physically or involve a huge sample size. They're also subject to bias such as non-response bias and measurement bias. With measurement bias, there is a risk of getting misleading results because of the difference between the surveys and the results. So the true values in the population. In terms how we limit our understanding of this issue, the issue of the bias may make it impossible to generalize the finding of different studies. So the retrospective records review. So they rely on a secondary data which can be taken from records, file, or database. The data can then be summarized by performing appropriate statistical analysis. And for the strength, one of the strengths of a record review is that it is often requires less effort and time. For instance, one does not have to spend money and time interviewing inmates, former inmates, or law enforcement officers for information, but they can get just access to the files or database for the information. And for the weaknesses, so one of the weaknesses for the retrospective records is that the quality of the data collected heavily depends on the accuracy of the data and the integrity of the record. There is also a chance that the researcher might miss important information if it was recorded. In terms of how they limit our understanding of this issue, retrospective record reviews may limit the understanding of this issue if the source of the data used in the retrospective records review is questionable. Ethics. So the issue of mass incarceration of Black raises several ethical issues. So the first is the failure to protect the weak in society. The code of conduct of law enforcement official requires that officers protect the weak in society. However, this does not seem the case with the current criminal justice system, because minorities who can be viewed as weak are the target of arrest. For instance, while Black are among the minorities in the US, they represent more than a third of the US prison population. So the situation is even worse. Black imprisonment rate is times more than white. An ethical dilemma could arise if the weak in the society are ones breaking the law. For example, what should the law do to a Black man who is accused of committing a serious crime but cannot afford bail? Should the accused be released into society where there is a risk of missing trial or running away? Or should he be detained and have his rights to freedom denied just because he is suspected of committing a crime? So ethics. So the second, so this, so the sec is, so the second is the high recidivism rates. The code of conduct for law enforcement officials requires that the survey the, that this that they serve and protect the community. However, this may not work if there are high recidivism rates because the wrongdoers still commit crimes even after releases from prison. Other than reducing the number of wrongdoers in society, imprisonment should also protect the community by ensuring that the wrongdoers reform reform and become good members of society. However, this is not always the case because most people who come out of prison are more likely to find themselves there. Besides, on this code of conduct, a possible ethical dilemma could happen during a rearrest. For instance, what should a law enforcement officer do when he or she comes across a Black man who got released from prison a few days ago and commits a crime? Should the officer fail to arrest the person on the bias the that the recidivism rates among Black are already high, or should have the officer rearrest the person, or should ha or should the officer arrest the person to ensure that the community is protected? Conclusion. The war on drugs, discriminatory application of law, and high recidivism are among the main causes of high incarceration rates among Black. Solution to the problem requires a holistic approach. The deterrence theory and the theory of incarceration can be used to explain the issue of mass incarceration of Black in the US. The use of the surveys and narrative review the use of the surveys and narrative reviews were some of the commonly used studies approaches. Finally, the high recidivism rates of the perception of racial discrimination are some of the ethical issues associated with this topic. And thank you.